technically we're trying to define what is good, what is bad, what's the importance of life, and how does that intertwine with the right to choose, like the autonomy of one's body, the privacy between the doctor and and the patient. So there's a select group of people who have all these values. They're very interested. They're very fundamentalistic about these values. That's why they don't want to teach you, for example, sex ed in the schools. So you're telling me, oh, we don't want, like, abortion is murder, but we're not going to give you any resources on how not to get pregnant because, sex is sort of deemed as a sinful thing, a dirty thing, or like it's part of the dogma. It's part of religious dogma.
No.
Why does the Virgin Mary virgin? That's a kind of an important topic to touch. And you have all these schools and all these methods of education that will decide, like, if we are educating sex, we are incentivizing sex, and we don't want to do that, so we won't say anything. And this is true in a few states. So we're gonna take away the education
like
about
the don't
sex.
say gay bill. That has nothing to do with saying the gay word.
There's no education for sex, like proper at a proper time. There's no.
How do you know?
Because this has been a newsworthy material for the past, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, what I've been paying attention. And a lot of places will decide to bury their hands in the sand and say this is not our problem. And a lot of times, there's a lot of religious dogma
So you
associated
think
with the
there's not
communities.
enough sexual education?
It's not even across the board, and you might find in these states that are also against abortion, they are also against a lot of sex ed.
Well, I mean, there's a
So-
line there too.
But you have this, you have these certain groups that also do not agree. They think homosexual love or sex is a perversion, and all of these things are kind of bundled together in this.
Well, from a religious perspective, it's just another sin, like just any
It
other
says
sin.
who? What religion?
Any
No,
Judeo-Christian.
sorry, because like you have to decide if you're a
Judeo-Christian.
Christian and you live by the word of Christ, which is love everybody. Fundamentally, that's the message of Christ, and that doesn't sound to me like love everybody.
But what is love though?
Before we get into to the universal love and compassion and loving thy neighbor, and
Just because love
living
is
the life like
primordial, we
Christ-
should accept everything. We should accept whatever people are doing or saying. Like, is that real love? Is that tolerance? Like, what is it? What is that?
both of those things actually. But so there's this whole movement, another ideological based on religious dogma, whatever you want to call it, that is bundling these like loose ends that they don't enjoy or don't like because it goes against their values on how other people should live. And we live in a country that, one, has separation from church and state. It's very
Has
important.
what?
A separation.
Okay.
So the church should not rule over the lawmaking. That should be a separate entity. Everybody is free to believe their own religion.
Okay.
And therefore,
The rule of law shouldn't come from religious premises.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And so this is sort of like, oh, we want the whole world to
What?
bend to our vision of how the world should be versus actually respecting the other person's liberty. And that's the fundamental quarrel between these arguments. Because again, I don't care if you don't hurt anybody, right?
Yeah.
If you're not infringing on other people's liberties
Yeah.
or freedom, you should be. That's what America is
course.
about,
Yeah.
right? So,
Freedom of speech and freedom of expression.
and therefore, that's why I will defend your right to believe any religion,
Yeah.
even though I'm personally not religious,
Yeah.
I'm a heterosexual male, cis male, whatever. You do you. Like, nothing of this affects me or offends me. I don't care. Like,
Right.
but if a lot of people feel offended by how other people live their lives or the choices that they make. So they don't really
don't think
believe
it's
in
so
true
much-
freedom. It's only freedom if you're in the lines that I understand or I agree with. And that's, for
And,
me, that's
you
the
know,
hypocrisy of
and
it
the
all.
radical left, and they are great at doing that, at imposing their lifestyle and their beliefs and their ideologies on other people, and putting people that disagree with their ideological views in a position of malignant and harmful
Hmm.
for other human beings and for society in general. So
I
I mean, they're the masters of intolerance, and I'm talking about radical groups.
Yeah, but radicals
You
will be
know,
radicals.
yeah,
Radicals will
and that
radicalize.
happens on the right too. But I think
So
right now, because
or left now. Uh,
well, I mean, well, because the left, the radical left, has become mainstream and has a big impact in the new generations that are coming to be. And I mean, that's self-evident. There's they have taken over the educational system, the mainstream media, the media outlets. This woke ideas have taken over every single media outlet, and they're putting out there more and more ideological um, ideological content in order to indoctrinate people and to accepting certain ideas that might be harmful for society in the long run. And that's
but
why there's a big pushback from the conservative movement.
no,
And that's
because
why we and that's why we see more and more this crazy polarization that we're seeing right now.
see the way I see the
Everything, well,
world.
that came also with the PC culture, and it's been around for a while. Like maybe it became more prominent um, in the 60s, I would say. So this identitary politics, you know.
Like
um well,
identity.
yeah, identitary politics.
I don't know.
um
Can you explain?
Identitary politics, it's basically it's basically playing with identity, with people's identities, putting people in different groups, separating society into groups
So that was a that
according
was
to certain characteristics that form the individual, such as color of the skin, sexuality, sexual orientation, or sexual identification. I would say, like gender, um, um, sex,
so they
male
invented
versus
it in the
female.
60s. So what do you call
Well,
racism
it
and like
became,
what's it called? Slavery. Wasn't that like a separation of groups based on the color of their skin? I'm
what is
confused.
that?
Slavery. Isn't that a separation of groups based on the color of the skin? Like how about the status or like society is
Well, but
sort of
yeah, but
threaded.
there's a I'm talking about I'm talking about I'm talking about the highlighting of those characteristics, um, in order to create a system of law, a system of legislation, that that has as a starting point those characteristics, instead of seeing the individual as an individual, regardless of color of the skin or sexuality or sex or uh, you know, immigration status or where you're from. That's what identitary politics is, and that's what we're seeing today, is the highlighting
And
of
what was the
those
context?
social issues or those individual characteristics that, in my opinion, are totally irrelevant, when it comes to the construction of the individual. There's there's so many more elements that come with the individual than just those superficial things.
But the
Like,
problem
your
is
sexuality shouldn't be important. I don't care if
it's not unless stuff gets decided against it at one point or another, which then makes it a big deal, even though I didn't want it to be a big deal, you know. So
why is it a
I
big
think
big
this is
deal
all a reaction
nowadays?
to the status quo. Like I don't think the world
Why?
is so perfect that there were no problems and people just got bored and started inventing. Then they invented racism in the 2000s. That's not how the history of the world went. I think. Maybe I'm mistaken, but all what you're telling me is like it's a product of their time. Like you're telling me that people were separated into groups, of course, like all throughout history.
Yeah,
That's not a
group
new
identity
thing.
politics. That's what I'm talking about. Like
That's not a new
identitary
thing.
politics, group identity politics.
All my history was taught. Oh,
You
you had the
separate people into
clergy,
groups,
you had the royalty,
and
and you
then you
had the
legislate
plebs.
according to those groups. That's what I'm saying.
That's a history of man.
Really?
When
But do you think that's a positive thing?
it's just how
Because
it is.
it's more prominent now?
How it is.
More
So
than ever?
so you would like to have everybody be equal, and nothing would be
That's how it should be.
nice. Good, caught you. Guys, how that?
Well-
Socialist.
Well, equal in what sense? Well, I don't
Doesn't matter.
Equality of opportunity or
Doesn't matter.
equality
Doesn't
of
matter.
outcome?
Like it's so that
no.
there's
What do you mean? That, of course, it matters.
Well, you're
If you're
arguing,
advocating for equality of opportunity, that's perfectly reasonable. But if you're advocating for equality of outcome,
No, I'm not advocating for equality of outcome.
and that's what's happening.
But I'm
Legislation it's molding to it's molding according to those group identity politics. And we see advantages and disadvantages being played in that way just for power and control. You don't see it's not a fair play anymore. It's not this talk like let's say affirmative action, for example. Is that something that is actually creating something positive for certain communities, or is that something that's creating something negative?
Define affirmative action for our viewers at home.
Affirmative action, let's say, affirmative action let's say in universities you have a quota, you have certain spots that are saved for African American descents.
Why do you think that is? Why did they come up with this idea?
Well, I'm not saying that. Well, in this specific example, I don't think that the intentions were bad. I just don't believe that forcing something into being, depending on how it's done, it's something that will bring positive outcome.
So having more people from a community that's been marginalized.
Well, you just see the numbers. There's a lot of a huge percent of dropouts, college dropouts, because they're not able to sustain grades because they come. It's a place that is given to them by the color of their skin. It's not something that was earned. So a lot of them are not able to sustain that position in universities because they don't have the basic foundation for it.
So you're saying that they're putting incompetent people?
Well, I'm not saying
choosing...
incompetent in that negative connotation. But yeah, it could be competence, a lack of competence, or a lack of. It's unfortunate that a lot of them come from a place of lack, especially educational. So that's what I'm saying is, an action like that does not solve the problem. Maybe it just creates more problems. So that's my point with group identity politics. You create legislation that is meant to help, but it ends up being harmful.
Hello everybody, and thank you for watching until the end. This has been Woke Wars, and I hope you liked our conversation. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Tell us what you'd like to hear us talk about next. Also, check out some of our other episodes. We post every Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We will see you on the next one.